I started now. I think I looked out the parking lot. I was waiting for one person that was coming in. You don't have to take a bunch of notes if you don't want to, because this will be on YouTube, so you can go back to it. Also, those slides, I just put them up here in case someone has a question. I can go to it. I gave State of the Village. I don't know, it's what, an hour and 20 minutes I spoke, so I talked about all these things. So you can go to that and see all of this, including all the slides are there. So you can go get all of that. But really, I don't have anything big planned as far as what I'm going to say. Other than the village is doing very well. We just finished the capital improvement plan, which we finally approved Monday night, and from there I can just open it up to any questions you have, and then I'll expand on anything that makes sense.
What's the situation on the water expansion with the second main, 50-inch main?
Sure. So for those of you that maybe how many of you know about the water expansion project? And how many of you don't? Okay. So just goes to show you, I've been talking about it for 6 years since I got here. I've been talking about it. So what basically the way our water system is, it runs on a single line through Chicago through Oak Lawn out here further south down in New Lenox. The problem with that is if you were to build a system today, you would build it on a loop, so that if you have a break, you can run the water the other way, nobody loses water. But with a single line, if you have a break, everyone downstream of that break loses water. Now, to date, there haven't been any major breaks. I'm not saying major, something that lasted more than a day. But part of that line goes under the CalSag. If we were to get a break under the CalSag, we would lose water for 4 or 5 days at least. And frankly, we have more water than anyone else. And I'm not exaggerating when I say people would die, because we just wouldn't be able to get water to them. So back, before I was mayor, they started negotiating to try and get a second line for redundancy purposes, so that if there's a break, they have a fully redundant system. And they started those negotiations in 2000. I think somewhere around 2014, 15-ish, maybe even 16, they finally came to an agreement with all the users. And basically, it's a water line that comes from Oak Lawn. So there's new pumping systems at Oak Lawn, that's all done. There's a water line, a bigger water line that comes out this way. That's the construction you've seen along 143rd, going through Forest Reserve, and coming across, and the construction on the east part of town, over just east of Catalina. That's what you see there. It's going to continue to run south, and then we are going to have a line that runs essentially down Wheeler to our main pumping station. Okay, and that second line we're fully responsible for, because our line's happening. Without that second line, we don't have redundancy. So in total, this project's about $300 million. We're on for about 25 million, or 25% of that, because we take 25% of the water. The good news for the village is it's bonded through Oak Lawn, and then it basically flows through the water rates, which you probably will actually start seeing this year with the water rates. So it's going to add probably, I think we figured $15 a bill. It was the right decision for them to do that, because without it, we don't have redundancy, basically. But that basically ensures that we have a redundant water system. And I think it's supposed to be completely finished all the way down to south in 26. I believe next year or the year after is when when it'll be tapped into our system. And part of that is Wheeler will be redone. There's a reason why Wheeler's hasn't been redone. It's because it was supposed to be redone 4 years ago, but there's no point in redoing it. We knew we were going to dig it up. So we just did a 1-inch resurfacing on it to buy us some time, and then it's going to be fully redone. So if you live over in that neck of the woods, there's going to be a serious amount of construction for the whole season while they put those pipes in. What other questions do we have?
What's going on with the mall?
As far as?
Stores?
They're fully leased except for Sears.
The theater?
Well, the theater had started doing asbestos removal, and then COVID hit. And if you remember what happened to the movie theaters in general during COVID, they basically pulled out of the project so they haven't added any theaters because because of COVID.
So there's nothing in Fort Sears right now?
There's nothing going in at Sears right now. So Sears was bought by a company called Q-Works. They would have to redevelop it, go through our redevelopment code. Because of the size of the building, they have to get approval for whatever they do there. They also have to upgrade a lot of things like the parking lot. What the people that bought it didn't understand is that they also own the parking lot, they also own part of the ring road, and they also own the road going to the light at Region, and they also own the light. So it's actually all owned by that Sears property. So, that is something that's top of our mind, it's top of Simon Properties' mind as well. They'd like to get that developed. But the rest of the mall is fully leased and actually has a waiting list, so they're doing pretty well there overall.
So in the budget, I didn't see anything for 143rd Elm Street, Ravinia, or John Humphrey Drive in that area there between 143rd and Elm Street for resurfacing or anything like that. Do you have a plan to do that? It hasn't been done in 20 years, at least.
143rd and Elm Street. So
here's 143rd.
Yeah, so 143rd Street, we've been talking about since the day I got here. It's the #1 project. We're not going to do any resurfacing. First off, it's a state road, so we can't resurface.
I don't care about 143rd. I'm saying from between like John Humphrey Drive, Catherine Drive, and Elm Street. Because when they did the construction before, that was a shortcut, and everybody drove through there. So now if you go.
So are you talking about 143rd Street, or are you talking about the other roads?
Talk about the other roads.
Okay. Hold on a second. What's going on?
So it was used as a shortcut, now when you drive through there really fast and a lot of holes and things.
Okay. All right, so I'll talk about the roads. So when, basically when I got here, we were spending roughly $4 million a year on our roads. Okay. So this slide that you see here shows what our road conditions were. This is all of our local roads. The red down there is 15% in very poor condition, about 40% in poor condition. You can see in very good condition, we had about 20%. Okay. The projection by this year, based on that 4 million, was essentially we still have 40%. You see, our roads in poor condition aren't changing. Basically we're keeping pace is about all we were doing. Okay. I recognize this. I couldn't get any more money spent on it from the board that we had. So literally the very first meeting of when Trustee Katsinas, Malani, and Healy were elected the first time, the very first meeting, which normally the first meeting is swearing in, you don't really do much. The very first meeting, we had we basically doubled our contract with the existing road builder. It actually was a 4-3 vote. The 3 existing board members, the 3 previous ones aren't here anymore. They voted against it. One of them actually went public and said we violated the law, blah, 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 which we didn't. But just that spending starting in 2019, so we went up to about $8 million a year through this year. Okay. This is over here to the left. Okay, is what we were able to do in just those couple of years. And what we were able to do is basically get our roads down to about 10% in poor condition. Excuse me. That was where it was projected to be. That was the projection. You see that one over to the left? That was what the one over here to the left. That's what it was projected to be. Okay? Based on the 4 million a year. Instead, if you see where we're at now, 2023, that's where we're at now. We're having doubled our spending. So we were able to bring down our very poor conditions to about 5% from 15, poor conditions to about 30%. We're able to, instead of being at 30% roughly, very good condition, got up to 35. So basically, we moved the needle a fair amount. So now we're going to be spending $6 million a year, and the projection basically will take all of our very poor conditioned roads they'll be gone. And then we'll have over 60% of our roads will be in very good condition. So we've been spending a lot of money on our roads. Now this assessment that we do, we assess every road in town. So we assess it, for its condition, all of it. It's not, and generally, not exactly, I'm not explaining why, but generally, we have been repairing the road sections based on what was in the worst condition, generally. Okay? we balance that with, like Wheeler, it's in really bad condition, we know there's a project, we're not gonna fix it to tear it up again. So there's some shifting movement. Also, like we had one subdivision that was really small, very, like 2 streets, in between 2 subdivisions that were at the top of the list, and that one was like 40. Well, it's like we might as well do all 3 at one time because we're there, right? So there's some movement to this, but by and large, we do it worst to first is essentially what we do, unless we know there's something else happening. So so this is our neighborhood road program this year, and your area over there, off the Grange Road, number 4, Clearview Estates, west part of Clearview Estates is this year. So you have 14 different areas here that you see that are going to be done this year. So as far as, what's that?
It's east of me.
Okay, so, yes, so what you can do is if, you can get the information on what the streets are, and we can tell you where it's at in the plan. Essentially, the roads we're doing now weren't planned to be done until 2029. So that's how far ahead we are. So it's just based on conditions and everything else. So I don't know exactly where yours sits with 240 different areas. So I don't know where yours sits in the hierarchy, but we can find it out and get back to you and tell you exactly where it's at. Any other questions?
I have another one. The museum, the history museum, you're moving that to the other, like civic center thing?
So the history museum, so basically, hardly anybody ever went there unless we had an event. I think we tracked, on average, there's a little over 1,000 visitors, and most of them are not unique visitors, it's the same people, that go there for the events. So the building needs $980,000 in repairs. So it doesn't seem to be a very good use of money. The whole idea of our artifacts in our museum, we're not going to have a specific museum. And I know my predecessor felt, oh, we'll have a museum, and I heard this, oh, everyone's going to come here, bustle, the kids are going to come here. I'm like, really? Let's be realistic here. That museum is actually, there's more artifacts out in front of the village hall here in these cases than we could fit in that museum. And so what we did is we said, what we want is we want to preserve our history. We want people to be able to see it. So we have these in the village hall now that people can look at, and I can tell you way more people see them because they stop every day. I see people stopping and looking at what's in there. We rotate those out every month or 2. Then we also have a display case when the library did their whole capital expansion. They built a case specifically for Orland Park artifacts that rotate Orland Park stuff. So that if you're in the library over here, you get to see it. We also have John Humphrey House. Long story, but it went to the Orland Historical Society as who it was in the Humphreys will. But they were smart enough in their will to say if the Historical Society ever cannot maintain it, doesn't have funds, that it goes to the village. So they didn't have funds, it went to the village. We're spending about $500,000 this year to restore it because the whole foundation has got problems. And it's a National Historic Landmark, one of 2 in town. So we're doing that, so once that's done, a lot of the appropriate museum artifacts from over the years will go in there where people can see it. Also, we have Stellwagen Farm. And Stellwagen Farm has a farmhouse that's being restored as well. And if you've been over to Stellwagen Farm, most of those buildings are in pretty good shape. And the Stellwagen, when they donated that, they also left the foundation with some money to help restore that. The village is doing that as well. So there'll be some things there. We have Bowley Farm. Also, Bowley Farm is going to be passive. It's not going to be open. We're going to get rid of the home. We don't need 3 historic homes, and it's just an old house. It's not a landmark or anything like that. So we have, and it's in really bad shape. So we're keeping 2 buildings there that are in decent shape, restoring those, and we will move everything else being brought to the ground, leaving a foundation with signage about what was here, and a walking path, so it'll be open land, still be something people can go see, but it won't ever be open to, there won't be anything really there open to the public, well, except Hank's Farm Stand will stay there where it's at. We'll probably move the Oscar cabins, which are replicas, they're not the original, to Stellwagen Farm, and we will also, in part of The historic sites plan is to move the Chipetti Slaughterhouse, which is original, but not in its original location, over to Stellwagen Farm. Trying to make a couple of locations with more things to see so people might actually go to. So that's the goal. And it, you know, again, they want to spend $1 million fixing that building. So that building on Beacon will get eventually. Right now we have some of our staff use that building. Eventually, we will move out of that building probably about 3 years, and then we'll sell off those 2 lots. They'll be single family lots, but we will leave the parking lot because it does get you over to the antique area. The parking is really limited in that area. If they do see some redevelopment of businesses down in that old area, there will be some parking you can get to. It's a block walk, but there's still some parking. So
you won't have a museum anymore?
we will not have a specific museum. We'll have Stellwagen Farm. We will have the Humphrey House, which is essentially a museum, and but it won't be called a museum.
So if you move it to the other park building, that building's supposed to be gone in a year as well, correct?
Which building?
I can't think of the name of it. It's
Cultural
just,
center?
what?
The cultural center?
Yeah, I think it's the cultural center, yeah.
The old library.
Yeah, the old library.
So the museum building is already, I mean, the museum's already closed.
I mean,
And so it's been closed since, well, it's been closed for a couple of months. And, you know, there were some people that were very upset that it was closed, that say we go there all the time. The first time they knew it was closed was 6 weeks after it closed. That was the first time I heard anything about it being closed, was after it had been closed already, so for, you know, well over a month. So it's just not, you know, again, we can't spend $1 million for some people. But the idea here is let's get our artifacts seen. They see them here, they see them at the library, they're going to see them at John Humphrey, they're going to see them at Stellwagen, and consolidate our sites. I mean, we're not a huge, you know, huge town. We can't have 5 different museum areas to go see anything. So that's the plan. So I'm gonna, this will work. Since you brought it up, you talked about our capital plan a little bit there. You mentioned it. So I'm gonna show you some of our capital plan stuff. You be all right?
I don't know.
So if you look at our capital plan, this is our capital plan over the last, over the next 5 years, or forward through 2027, so this year and through 2027. So we have $198 million in capital planning, a capital improvement program we're planning on doing. Okay? And a bunch of major projects here that we're doing. You can see through the years, like next year, the police training facility, that kind of starts everything. So our police firing range, and we talked about that this week and approved it, approved the engineering on it. Our firing range, frankly, is dangerous. And if you saw pictures of it, you're like, you're kidding me, that's where we were training. So we're gonna build a new training facility, and that's kind of over off of 104th, between 167th and 159th, and 108th, in between that areas. And we own the land already. So we're gonna build a police training area there and a new emergency operating center. Once that happens,
Excuse me, where do they train right now? You said it's
well, they're getting a shooting qualification to private range. They shut down the range, it's not safe. And then we can still do simulator stuff, they just can't actually live fire. They can still train you, they just can't shoot, they can't live fire.
Yeah, but where are they training?
Huh?
Where are they doing the training?
So they're doing training at the old range, they can't shoot actual rounds.
Where is the old range?
The old range is next to Public Works facility.
Oh, that's a range there.
So on the north end of that, and every time you fired a gun, everyone in those restaurants would call and complain. And trust me, if you saw the pictures of it, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, it's a bunch of slats and lean-tos that they've been training at for years. It's not safe. So right now they're training there, but without shooting. They're qualifying for shooting in private locations. So that, see if I can, here's the police firing range, here's a picture of what it would look like. So it gives you some idea of what they do. That whole kind of orangish area there is That's where the firing would be done. And then it's got double doors so they can bring vehicles in and they can train and do other stuff. There's also a simulator there. And that training room with all the desks there, that would actually be the EOC. Well, if we ever had to operate, we just pull the desks out and it becomes the emergency operating center.
Where will this be?
This is over between 104th and 108th, south of 159th. In that industrial complex over there. Kind of near the fire training facility. So once that happens, then our EOC, which is in this building over here, is no longer needed. That was the old police station that has jail cells and everything down below. And it's pretty much, it's not usable because of jail cells and all of what's got down there. I mean, we use it for some things, but it's like mostly storage. That whole area will be redone so that we can actually use it all for storage. It allows us to bring our storage from, we have storage in like 11 different buildings. It allows us to bring all of our storage to one place for our parks departments and all these other little buildings that we have. These little buildings that require money as well to maintain and everything else will basically be kept operating until we need to put big money, until we need to put money into them. So as we need to put money into them, we'll take them to the ground because we won't need them. It also, at that time, we're going to move all of the parks into that building. So right now, part of the parks is over in that house that's by the hospital cabins. So they will move over here, so they'll all be consolidated in one place. Basically, once the EOC is done, it kind of starts the whole ball rolling. When that happens, and they move that, that's also when the people from the museum move over into this building, when all that storage is done. Because part of that house, something else we're doing next year, they're building a new storage garage. Their storage garage is kind of falling down for all of our parks equipment, for John Humphrey and all that. So once that's done, all of those people will move. So that kind of starts the whole ball rolling. That's when, eventually, then it's when the museum goes. And that's when, I think you had a question about the Veterans Center. So the veterans, the plan is to move them to that house. It has a deck, it has a full kitchen, which I think as a member of both of those posts is better than what we have. And then take out all of the offices, which are easy, they're just internal walls, and make the big meeting room. I think overall it's going to be a much better space, it's different, and we will move the veterans over there because that building needs about $400,000 of repair, the veterans building does. We'll have a new veterans building, but that building has a new roof, a new deck. It's 20 years, we don't have to worry about any spending, and we're going to build the storage that we need and all the internal costs. The cost of the current veterans building, $400 grand over the next 5 years. The cost of moving up to the new one's 100, so or less. So that's kind of the plan. So lots of movement, trying to consolidate our buildings because it's expensive to maintain all these buildings.
And all of this has been approved already?
Yes, I mean some of it can be changed obviously because it's not done yet. But yes, the board has approved all of this. We've been working on it we've been working on the capital plan for 2 years.
But not the cultural center, that field.
The culture center is being demolished next year, and so it's programmed for this year. We didn't do a lot there anyway, so we're moving the programs out of there into this whole area, which is going to be the Civic Center, the Ladies Center, and the Parks Building. So all the park stuff will be at these buildings. That will get demolished. That needs $6 million of repairs. So for a building we don't use a lot, and then after we take that down, we actually have it in our plan. I think it's in here somewhere. I'm just looking to see if it's up here. Yeah, so 2025, you'll see Dugan Park up here. So that will be redone. The thought right now, we've got a company actually right now designing it. The thought is that it's going to be tennis and pickleball courts, because pickleball, so we get constant requests for more pickleball courts, so kind of more concentrated pickleball courts, and probably with lighting there as well, because we don't have that many courts that are lit. So that's the plan over there. Sure.
Not related to this topic, and I hope nobody asked it already because we were late, but what's Orland's plan on what happened over in Finley at the carnival with the kids? Or we have a plan? Because I anticipate, if they're starting that they might do it everywhere.
So the first thing I would say is we already had a plan. which they're, you know, way different than what was at Tinley. So our plan already for Summerfest, which is Father's Day weekend, was we had a fence, we had entry control points, so you can only get in there. There was no fencing, so you could walk in anywhere. So you have to enter through 2 locations. There's metal detectors. They're big. They're somewhat big and passive, so they're not, you know. We're actually testing them out at the Taste this weekend for the first time. But there's sort of metal detectors as well. So those were already all there. They have some private security handling the entrances and all that, but we have significant police presence there already. And then the only thing that we were still talking about, wasn't sure if we were going to do or not, was whether or not we were going to have an adult supervision or youth supervision policy. We were trying to decide, do we want to do it, do we not want to do it? And we saw that and said, okay, that makes it easy. We're doing a youth supervision policy. So we have all those policies in place. So we feel pretty comfortable with our security plan. We can never predict something can always happen, but you know, I think we're well prepared to handle that. And we already had that in place before Tinley Park ever happened. We were already preparing for that. So our police department was all over it. I can tell you that the chamber wasn't happy because of the cost involved, and they're like, well, this is going to kill our event. And I'm like, well, yeah. I started to lay out all the things. This is before Tinley. I started to lay out all the things. I said, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. I said, yeah, that's because you don't do this for a living. I don't do this for a living, but my police department does, and they keep us safe. So we're going to do it. And then Tinley happened. I picked up the phone. I said, now do you get it? And he said, yep, got it. So we have a good plan in place.
I'll be glad to hold my question until you're to the section on the public safety.
I haven't been running down those sections. I've been just hopping around.
So on the youth supervision policy, and I apologize, I don't watch all of the village meetings to keep up to date, but I know that there's been a discussion point about some of the youth supervision and the limitations about where they can be in the public programs and public buildings. I live in an area where there's been kind of a continuous presence, excuse me, a continuous presence for years already, and you're in that area yourself of some kids that kind of roam around in the evening or growing up. They're getting a little more aggressive in terms of some of their inspiration and cousins and stuff in the neighborhoods. So my question, is there an effective plan in place to deal with this group of kids? You know, it looks like they're backfilling with younger ones again. They come bang on the windows at night, ride around in golf carts, mischief makers.
So,
It's been going on for years.
so I mean, some of that, is somewhat shocking. I mean, I know one of our board members who lives 2 doors down from me, or 3 doors down from me, got his house saved 2 weeks ago. Well, the reality is that's high school kids, their high school friends, egg their house. No one came to their house at 3 in the morning from out of town to egg their house. Just, you know, these are the kinds of things that have been going on since I was a kid, since you were kids, the silly, stupid stuff. We have these discussions. So regarding that specifically, if you see an incident, you see somebody behaving in a way they shouldn't behave, call the police. We will go out and talk to them. Usually that solves the problem. If they're just kids being kids, usually that'll solve the problem. If it's something, now if it's a kid that we have a continual interaction with, then that's a, because we know, we track it all, we know who we've talked to and all that, so we'll keep track of that. So if you see anything like that, that's what we need to do. Regarding the youth supervision policy, we have one at the mall. It's on Fridays and Saturdays. We put that in place because Fridays and Saturdays in the evenings, in particular on Fridays, were the highest shoplifting times in the mall. And it was mostly youth doing it. And I can tell you, so to give you the history of it, when I got here, the former mayor had not spoken to the people at the mall in 7 years. There was no relationship there, which I thought was absolutely insane, because it is directly, it's 10% of our tax base, probably 40 or 50% indirectly. It's a huge part of our tax base. And we started developing a relationship. And I've been bringing up a youth supervision policy for several years. They were reluctant because they've never seen it work anywhere. They've never done it, but they've seen other places that have done it. Didn't work. We finally got them to the point and I'm like, hey, what do you got to lose? Try it for 3 months, we'll support you. So we provide a lot of support with part-time police officers at every door, not handling the policy, because they had someone at every door, just in case someone was unruly. And so you can see, this is since March of 2021 when it was put in. So we're still ejecting a lot of people, okay? So the, sorry that there's one thing missing, but the number of ejections went from 12,000 in 2022. Excuse me, ejections are almost 13,000. The number of wristbands, so youth going in there with a parent, 15,000, right? So you can see we're still seeing a lot of it. Here's the interesting thing: since that was implemented, there has only been one retail theft during those hours in over 2 years, and that was an adult, not a kid. So it went from the highest retail theft to none, basically. And it's been very well received by the mall and its tenants. So the mall traffic is still top 1% of all malls. The dwell time for customers inside the mall is up 5%. And the sales are up. It had the second best recovery after COVID. So the mall's doing pretty well on that front. So it's very effective. So that's why we're doing it at our the events that we have coming up. As far as our other facilities, we don't really have a policy of that. We have implemented a policy for any unruly behavior, for suspensions and things like that. And I can tell you that staff came to us and they said they just want lifetime bans on certain behaviors. And the board discussed it and said, listen, 13-year-old kids, 12-year-old kids, they do stupid things. That doesn't make them a criminal for life, for getting in a fight at Sportsplex, right? So we modified that. It said that regardless of how long they're suspended for, after a year they can reapply, so that they're not banned for life. For something I think most of us in here probably would not want to be banned for life for the worst thing we ever did when we were a kid, right? We probably did something bad at some point, got in a fight. I mean, when I was younger, fights were fairly common. Now not so much. But anyway, so we said, hey, yeah, we want to have a policy that we can react for bad behavior, but at the same time, we don't want for a kid, they're supposed to learn, not have something like that affect them for their whole life living in Orland Park. So we have a policy in place, and there's a whole different set of procedures, and from a 2-week to 30-day to 60-day to 90-day suspension to full. Well, they can do a lifetime, but they can always reapply after a year to try and get their status back. So.
Can I just add one more question?
Sure.
I don't mean to be sounding like I'm up to date on this, but I know the Safety Act has been met with a lot of debate, and it was not necessarily in place in what it was initially proposed to be, but affecting us locally. What about the issue of trespass on private property and by youth? And I'll be very specific. It's about the kids that go into people's pools in the backyards, with blockades and that kind of thing. What's our status on managing all that? And the reason I ask is I had a deep discussion with our insurance agent, and they have opinions too.
So the Safety Act actually has not gone into effect. It's still valid, or I actually think it's going to be declared unconstitutional. For those of you who know, during my run for office, I spoke on the board for it. I wasn't speaking as part of running for Congress, but because I was, it got even more picked up, and it ended up and then someone did a TikTok video off of it. It ended up on viral throughout the country. Actually brought attention to the Safety Act, which is sad, really, that Orland Park Mayor brings attention to the Safety Act, which everyone knew was so horrible, right? But then everything I said was accurate. Now, for 2 months, I was blasted about how I was lying and scaring people and all that. Right after the election, everything that I said, in the next month, they did a trailer bill that fixed almost everything I mentioned in that bill, okay? But still, there's still some bad things in it. It was a step in the right direction when they changed. The trespass issue, for example, we can now remove someone from, but it's not in effect. So because it still has constitutional issues that I don't think it can overcome. The way our Constitution, any any law has to be pertaining to one issue. This went across like 6 issues. So, so I think it's going to end up, I mean, I don't even know where it's at in court, but it has not been in effect. Because like many of the things that have happened with the current governor, it's been a complete overreach. And stepping into that for just a second, which we should all be aware of, is that the governor just signed a bill that was passed in this session that any challenges to constitutionality can only be filed in two counties. Sangamon County, which is Springfield, and Cook County, where they have a completely stacked court system. Which I also think that's unconstitutional, because how can you take, I mean, anything we file, we have to file in either Cook or Will, right? Obviously, if it's something like that, we want to file it in Will, because we might actually get a fair hearing, right? We're not going to get one in Cook. But they just made it so no one can get a fair one, and basically whatever, that they'll go with whatever, because we know that both of those court systems are highly politicized. So that's what they've done to try and stop anything unconstitutional from it. And what'll end up happening is it'll still end up in court. It'll just end up at higher level courts, and just, you know. So it's unfortunate. The reaction was, instead of passing constitutional laws, it was to make it harder to declare them unconstitutional. That's really what the reaction is. So that's something that should scare you, regardless of your political affiliation, to be honest. So our court system is meant to be a check. So.
Can you explain how, when these so-called flash mobs organize, who's aware of them, and do you get the police department to notify?
I mean, it's typically social media, but we monitor that.
Who monitors?
Our police department monitors social media.
And you're in communication, I'm assuming?
Well, yeah, the police departments, I mean, for sure. I mean, if you think back to June 1st of 2020, that was right around when all the riots were happening. It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I can't remember which day was the first, but it was right around the time. So Friday is when they started in Chicago, and they didn't call in the National Guard, they didn't do anything, and they destroyed Water Tower Place, they destroyed the entire Miracle Mile. Well, finally on Sunday, they used the National Guard to block off the whole city, and then they started coming into the suburbs. I got a call at 9 in the morning, happened to be on the golf course at the time, since I finally was allowed to play back then. At 10 in the morning, I returned the call to the chief. He said, we're gonna call everyone in, because this is what's happening, this is what we're seeing for chatter, we think they're gonna be heading out this way. So we literally had every officer here. And the chief talked about this on Monday, because we're going to name the police station the Timothy J. McCarthy Police Headquarters. So we approved that Monday night. So he was here, he spoke, and he talked about those riots. Great men and women in the department. We had one person that was 4 hours towards California on a motorcycle trip, and he turned around and came back. Our fire district, they used their trucks to help block entrances. Our public works department came in doing all that. We also got fortunate with the timing. If you remember, we were doing outdoor dining, and one of the things with the outdoor dining was that a barrier between patrons and cars. So we had this issue with barriers, and these restaurants were hurting; they couldn't afford barriers. So we called Zinga, they have the concrete barriers, so we got concrete barriers delivered to us, and we were actually dropping them off at restaurants. So we actually had a whole bunch of concrete barriers that weren't placed yet. So we were able to get those places. If you recall the mall, several entrances were completely blocked. But I was here that afternoon, I was here that whole day. And trust me, for 5 hours, we were busy. We were busy chasing people out of town. Groups of 4, 5, 6 cars. It's not by accident that we didn't have anything hit. It was a very, very busy time. That went on for a few days. In fact, I put in the only emergency order I ever issued was for that night, a curfew, 9 o'clock, and then the board extended that to Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday night, and then stopped it at, and then, so because we met Monday night, so the board voted to extend it as they should. If we had met for another week, then I would have done it, but because we met, the board should do it, not just me. And so we did that through Wednesday night, and then we opened back up. And the chief wanted to do it for a week, okay? And I told the chief, I said, you know, these businesses have been out of business, they've got to get back open. I said, let's do it for a couple more days and see where we're at. And then before we make a decision, hey, it's gonna be another week. So.
Do we have a notification system that something like that would recur? Hopefully it will not. Would that go through a code red report?
It goes through Code Red. In fact, that went through Code Red. Multiple times that went through Code Red. Also, our email system, if you're signed up for our email alerts, it went on to social media. We have all of those, all of the above. If you sign up for Code Red, if you sign up for email alerts, it'll give you all that.
Have you had any contact with the manager or the owner of the Orland Park Place Mall? Because the parking lot is a disaster. Several businesses have gone under there. And if you walk in between Nordstrom Rack and I forgot what the other business is, maybe Old Navy, that large open area where the escalator goes up to what used to be Bed Bath & Beyond, that whole area looks awful. I mean, absolutely awful.
So we can let our code enforcement folks know and go take a look at it. I haven't spoken to them specifically. They've got it up for sale, but yeah, Bed Bath & Beyond went out of business nationally.
Right.
Steinmart pulled out. Binny's actually moved to a bigger location.
Baby's gone.
So that, what's that?
Baby's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but Steinhoffers is taking Steinmart and Bed Bath & Beyond, so they're taking all 95,000 square feet, but they won't open until next year.
But
So-
what's it gonna look like when people walk in and it looks awful? They might not even decide to
Well,
go in.
so we're gonna, well, first off, once Steinmart moves in there, they're gonna keep it clean because they're gonna have, or Steinhoffers, once they move in there, they're gonna obviously keep it cleaned up because they'll be in this, right? That's part of the issue is when there's not a tenant. But we'll have our code enforcement folks look at it. This is the first time I've heard anything about Orland Park Place.
Thank you.
And we do our code enforcement, if you have an issue, just, you can email us at the mayor's office, you can email the village manager, you can let the police department know. If it's a code enforcement issue like trash or something like that, we're on top of it because we know how important it is to keep things looking good. So, but we have 22 square miles and, we physically can't be everywhere and see everything. I see things all the time where I go, where I live, just living my life, walk my dog, whatever. I see things all the time. I'll see a dead tree hanging over, I'll let the public works know, because we don't have enough people to see every little thing that, we get people calling, some people irate about, sidewalk raised an inch. Well, think about how many sidewalks we have. We can't possibly know. So those types of information, we welcome them because once we know about it, we create a work order and we send someone out to take care of it.
I asked this question once before, but I'll ask it just if there are any updates. But to me, it's a really unfortunate statement of our society, but it's not a good image for Orland Park. And we see the panhandlers and their young families and their children in the corners. Is there any address to that?
There is not. It has been declared basically by the Supreme Court that it's a constitutional right. So there's really nothing that can be done if they are on a public roadway, something owned by the government. If it's a private property, that's up to, say they were in the Costco parking lot. Costco could ask them to leave. If they don't, then we can remove them for trespassing. That's if those businesses so choose that. Regarding the corners and things like that, I haven't seen too much of it. I hear about it. Some people think, oh, it's there all the time. Like, I drive the streets all the time. I've never just seen it, except for coming off I-80, which isn't ours, by the way, off of the interstate. That's one place I see a lot. So if you see it, you can call the police. If they are there with little kids, and it's a danger to those little kids, that we can take some action there for safety of the children. And we can, but there's only so much we can do, and typically it's just a conversation, and usually that'll move them along, but not always, and that unfortunately there's very little we can do from that perspective. But again, if you see it, call. We'll send someone over to at least chat with them, especially if there's kids in an intersection, or if they're walking into an intersection, traffic and stuff like that, and then that's different. And then sometimes we actually do have those people working the corners that, like Lions Club or something like that. Sometimes it's actually approved, like for some of that stuff. that they can work those corners for, selling Tootsie Rolls or whatever the Lions Club does, the lifesavers. I think.
Some of the things that you've mentioned, like the kids roaming in the neighborhood or like these people family or that, you suggest calling. Do you recommend calling the non-emergency police number?
Yeah, use your judgment, but if things are not, I mean, either way we're gonna get it, but not in non-emergency if it's not an emergency. And I call into, sometimes I call our chief, sometimes I call, non-emergency, sometimes I call 911. So I wanna, because we're on this topic, I'm gonna try and find the slides. Sorry, give me a second. It's been a few weeks since I delivered a slide. So these are calls for service for our police. Now that's not 911 calls, so don't take that as a 911 call. Calls for service include 911 calls, they include 411 calls. They also include things that we just do on a regular basis. So we do business checks. One of the things that we did that's helped lower crime quite a bit is our officers no longer do their reports in the station. So when you see an officer doing reports or whatever at Best Buy, they're sitting in the car, they might be writing a report, but they're at Best Buy, which gives us a presence there. And if something happens, they're there right now, right? But each one of those businesses they go to is a business check, so they're required to do so many business checks every shift. And so they go look at various businesses in their beat, make sure that nothing's going on there. The spike in 2020 was all the business checks we were doing because of things being closed. So we were checking them much more frequently because there weren't people in there and active. So you can see we're very busy, but we do, any call we get, we do follow up on. We go out there, we want to hear about it, because the best way to prevent crime is if you see something, say something, because 22 square miles, and we may have anywhere from 8 to 14 people on shift at one time. It's a lot of ground to cover. So chances are most of the things that are happening we don't see. We see it because you see it. So you see something that, what I always tell people is, we have instincts for a reason. If the hair standing up on the back of your neck, you're probably right. Even if you don't think you're experienced, and even if you don't want to harass somebody or whatever, your instincts are probably correct. So pick up the phone and call. And we'll take a look at it. I tell my kids this, all the time. It's like, hey, if your instincts say this is a bad idea, it's a bad idea. Trust it. That's why we have it. Any other questions?
Oh, I
Well, I'm asking.
Well, I saw you scanning through the slides. You had one about concert venue.
Yeah.
Where's the funding coming for that?
So we funded that last year. So the capital improvement program. So I'll walk through the whole capital improvement program, which is our finance. Okay, so let's see. Here's the infrastructure investment. So I'll just show you a picture of what this looks like. So this is the concert venue, which is going to break ground. So today, there's a concert out here. Okay? We rent the stage, we rent the fencing, we rent all of that for that. Now today is free. We did all free this year, so we spending less money on the bands that are not ticketed, because we thought they would all be in the parking lot, because we thought we may be under construction already. It turns out we're able to do one in the lawn. The next one, we'll break ground in the next, week? We're gonna break ground about a week or two. We're gonna break ground out here. So, but you'll see here, you've got a stage, you've got a seating area in front, which we could do VIP seating or something like that. Behind that, so that entrance is already there off of Summer Glen Road. There's going to actually be an area where they can load and unload into out of the stage. So instead of renting a stage, and there's also going to be dressing rooms and all of that back there, so that we don't have to rent RVs and all of the things that we have to do now. Right now, we have to rent RVs, we have to run generators. That's the other thing. When this was built, this was approved in 2003. A band shell and everything were approved in 2003. And they built the park, but they didn't run electricity. How do you do concerts without electricity? So we have to do generators for that. So if you see where it says lawn seating, it might be hard from the distance. but you'll see there's a current hill right there. That's where the hill is. It's right to the right of the G on lawn seating, okay? That hill is gonna move back to kind of understand under where the main entrance is, so that you have much more seating area there. And then we're gonna expand around that seating area, and you're gonna have, as you see, there's like an asphalt area behind the vendor areas. That way they can load and unload without interacting with people. And it's actually it was designed to host the Taste of Orland, which is our biggest event. So all of the vendors will actually be along the actual concert venue, as opposed to how it is now in the Village Hall parking lot. So all of our events, our Market in the Park, our Taste of Orland, all of the concerts that we do will all move to this location. The nice thing is, if you've been to, how many have been to Taste of Orland? No parking. And we're taking the parking lot. Well, you've got 3,000 parking spaces here. So it's a much better venue. It's a good venue to do it. And you know, we decided as a board that, you know, we're spending a lot of money on capital, a lot of roads and parks, and this has been planned for a long time, and that this was the appropriate thing for us to do.
Now, is that parking, is that the Metro?
It's the Metro, but we were allowed, yeah, but part of the agreement is we use it, and we also maintain it. So it's Metro parking on this side of the tracks, and there's Metro parking on the other side of the tracks. Plus, you know, so our their July 4th concert will move over here, so we don't have to rent a stage. So from an operating cost perspective, it'll be much cheaper. And we're not going to make, it's not a money maker, but on an operating cost expense, it's going to be much easier to set up, take down, that type of thing over here. And it's going to be a very nice venue, and we won't be using it, you won't be coming to the Village Hall and, you know, trashing everything we have here.
So those townhouses and stuff, were they built after 2003?
They were built, yes. So that subdivision is, well, it was, so you see the big building right above the seating area, the big building? It was supposed to be 4 condos like that across. There was only 1 condo building ever built. The townhouses were off to the south, and then there was single-family homes. There's 81 single-family homes. I know because I lived there, okay? I bought my lot in 04. I moved into my house in June of 2005. There is one person that lives there that lives in a condo that's lived there longer than me in that whole area. And I moved in June 20, 2005. So we knew it when we bought our lot that this was coming. Those townhouses right across the street there, they were actually built last year. So we've been hosting concerts there since 2011. So it's no surprise. I came here actually when we had the planning commission because someone called me from staff and said, there's all these people here and they're complaining, and I listened to it. And I came up and I said exactly this. I said, listen, I've lived here since 2005. I knew it when I bought. This is not a secret. I've talked about it at every single state of the village. We've talked about it. I think we had 8 public meetings just on this alone that were specifically for this. So it's not hidden or secret. And I've talked to people, some people, you know, they're mad because it's being built there. Like, well, yeah, you bought 2000, someone bought last year, right? And you know, no one has bought this complaint, has bought before 2020. So that we've had complaints.
So
So
I've read the neighbor posts and like the Orland page.
yeah,
And there's certain individuals that are really
Yeah.
complaining. And you said it's been on the books since.
it's 2003 it was approved.
So,
Yeah, so this was approved and planned since 2003 to have a band shell there. It was built as an outdoor concert venue. That's what it was specifically built for. So there's no surprises here. And like I said, I've been mayor since 2017. I actually ran on it in 2017. I ran on it in 2021. The trustees ran on it. This is if you don't know about it, it's the worst kept. You're not. I mean, I can't get more information out there than this. It's been in how often has it been in our village annual newsletter? I think it's been in there for 3 or 4 years.
More than that, probably 5.
Yeah, so I mean, every possible way we're getting it to people, we're getting it to people. If you don't see it, and we've actually had concerts across the street from where you live. It's like you can't be as surprised that we do them. So
I'm just wondering if you know the seating capacity or the total capacity of that area.
it was designed for a seating capacity of 5,000. The reality is it can probably sit 12 or 13,000, but it's designed for 5,000. But it's our biggest event there will be the Taste of Orland. and it can handle it. The Taste of Orland probably gets more than 5,000 people at one time, maybe up to 8, 9 at one time, and that can easily handle that.
Is there enough parking for that amount of people?
Well, okay, so Taste of Orland is held here, right? We use the parking lot. Is there any parking there? Got Humphrey's got 200 spots. And I think the rec center has about 100. That's 300 spots. This has 3,000. Parking spots between the two metro lots have 3,000 parking spots. And then if you look at the rest of Centennial Park, there's probably another 500 or so.
You said between 5,000 and 13,000, so
Yeah.
if there's one 3,000 parking spots.
Yeah, well, people will come one for one in a car. Look, our Taste of Orland sometimes gets 10,000 people here. Right out here in this parking lot, and there's no parking. So, what's that?
And why?
Well, yeah, and a lot of people will walk here too that can get there, that way. And then again, we've got 3,000 spots right next to it, and then we've got another, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 in the rest of Centennial Park. So, and if we had something that big, we could do the soccer field or something. And that's what we do for Taste of Orland. We actually do some parking over here on the baseball fields at Taste of Orland, but not a lot, maybe a couple hundred cars. That's it. That's all for all the workers and that kind of stuff. So I mean, there was no other place in Orland that we could do this. I mean, it was designed for this. That's what it was built for. I mean, that's what it was originally. This land and that parking lot was all, that was part of the plan. They just never put electric in, they never put the band shell in, they never did any of that.
Can I switch subjects? I know that this is not a pleasant one, but I want to ask. The phone calls that have been addressed before that are very degrading and speak poorly of our Orland Park government, etc. They're less numerous, but they still filter through, coming from different numbers. No matter if you block a call, it seems to be still arriving. How is this happening still, and is there anything that has been effective to stop all of this? Obviously, blocking calls on a particular cell phone, I'm mystified as to why never was picked up.
Yeah, so nobody wants to stop more than me. If anyone, I know that you guys get them, and I'm probably the subject of 98% of them. I have personally I've never gotten it, but a lot of people send them to me, and the good news is I have them logged, and if we ever nail the people down that are doing it, and we pretty much have a pretty good idea so I've got 90 of them on tape. There's probably been over 100 because we've missed some, and they're pretty vile, some of them. I actually talked about this at the State of the Village, so if you want to hear more details about it, I talked about it for 20 minutes. It's a very uncomfortable topic, it's a depressing topic, but I felt it needed to be said. So I do have slides on, and I'll blow through them quickly. I will not play. I have played some of the robocalls, 8 of them, which is less than 10% of what I have. Let's see. So I'll go to that. And like I said, it's some pretty bad stuff, but you can draw your own conclusions of these attacks. And in fact, there was one, you talk about next door, there was one yesterday that someone posted, who used to be an employee here, who posted an email saying that, and I'm going to show you that email, that I'm the one doing the attacks. So that's their new thing, is that, so they've been doing that for the last 2 weeks. So one of the things we talked about, and Bill Healy is here, by the way, Trustee Healy came in. So the reason I started with this is we were dealing with a defamation lawsuit from the previous village manager, okay? And this will be a little bit longer than probably what you wanted, but you just need to understand the background. So I was elected in 2017, April 4th. He was hired April 17th before I swore in on May 15th. Now he happens to be the former deputy committeeman for the former mayor, and he was hired before I was even made mayor. But you can figure that out, not the best thing in the world. In September 5th, they extended his contract for 3 years. I was the only vote against it. It also includes 6 months of severance pay. Okay. The following year in August, the Illinois State Legislature passed a law limiting severance for public officials to 20 weeks, so slightly less than 5 months. 5 days later, the board, it didn't go into effect until January 1st. 5 days later, less than 1 year into his contract, they extended his contract for a year beyond my term, and they gave him severance to 9 months. A law was just passed, I mean, basically double what the law allows, the new law. The law went into effect on January 1st. On January 2nd, he started a secret investigation, which many of you have heard about on me, in which the whistleblower was never even interviewed. And after we found out about this, so he resigned on May 6th. On May 7th, we found out about the investigation because there was an invoice that was due for $40-some thousand. Okay. The board voted to complete. I was obviously not happy. The board voted to complete the investigation. The first line of the conclusion of the investigation is this was a political witch hunt. The whistleblower, who still works here, by the way, said they came to me and I told them nothing happened. They being the village manager, not the people that he had investigated. They didn't find anything. If they had found it, I guarantee you they'd have used it in the election. They didn't, okay? So I held a press conference once we concluded that on May 30th. On September 3rd, the former village manager was hired in Portage, Michigan. He hired a former trustee as his village manager, as an assistant village manager. Okay? And then the following year, the first quarter, he pays the former mayor $47,000 in consulting fees in Michigan. So then, that same April 10th of that year, he files a lawsuit for defamation against me, against Bill Healy, who, by the way, he never worked under Bill Healy, ever. All Bill ever did was accept his resignation that night in his first meeting. So that's kind of the background there. Why is this important? Well, first off, why did they sue Bill Healy? Wasn't involved in any of this. Bill, I'm sure will nod his head because we went into executive session back here to talk about this lawsuit, and the 3 existing trustees that were still held over insisted that Bill and I could not vote on this lawsuit. Well, if you think about it, if we're removed from that, now they have a 3-2 majority, and they can vote to show the village manager more money and just pay him off for this lawsuit. We actually had to hire a separate attorney that was not associated with the village to look into that issue, and they concluded that we could vote on it. There wasn't a conflict, and so we did, and we said there's no way we're paying this guy a severance. And he's already gotten severance, we're not paying him more money. This has been going on since that time, and we think that, next week, Bill, or the week after, we're supposed to get a summary judgment from the judge. We'll see what he says. So it hasn't gone to trial, it's still sitting in front of the judge. That's how long this has gone on. There's been depositions and all kinds of stuff, okay? What we have found out through that, through this court case though, which is what is important, is that there's no question Joe Margo, he had $20,000 spending authority, and he spent $46,000 on this investigation, okay? It was never authorized by a public vote as required, so it does violate the Open Meetings Act. There's some debate as to whether the other trustees knew or didn't know. You get conflicting answers from them. Some say they did know, some say they didn't. Some say they did, and then they said they didn't, and then they said they did. They kind of jumped all over the place. Bottom line is, though, to do something like this, you need to do it publicly. And they didn't, okay? He also paid our former assistant village manager, Carrie Friday, one of the people on your social media stuff, $10,000 in violation of village policy when she left. But it's within his spending authority, so we didn't know. Okay? So, other things that we learned during that election, Mike Carroll read an email on his board floor, and he said in deposition that he received it via FOIA. The FOIA was in March. He read it in January. So they were going through my emails before they, even And the email was a personal one, actually. So, anyways, that's the kind of stuff. But this was the big one, and this was actually posted on yesterday, again. So, Joe Margo, during his lawsuit, used an email and said, this proves that I was doing the robocalls, okay? The day I learned about that was actually in this room, the head of the Chicago Federation of Labor demanded to know an answer of where this came from. I had no idea what he's talking about. Turns out, within an hour of him doing that, Joe Margo added it to his lawsuit, and the guy who think is doing the robocalls filed a countersuit using it. Okay? Well, if you want, take a look at your calendar. So this email, Saturday, August 11th, 2017. August 11th, 2017 is actually a Friday. So if you're going to fake the email, you should get the day right. So they're no longer using that, and court has been proven that it's false. They're still using it on social media to try and tell people that I'm behind this. They actually fabricate it. There's other things in here that, you know, like no punctuation and things like that. But here's the interesting thing. Joe Margo was asked in deposition where he got the email from. He said, I believe it was Jerry Gorman. What did Jerry Gorman say when he gave it to you? Here, use this for your lawsuit. Okay, so we have a pretty good idea. The person this came from, or Mike Henry, he's the guy, him and Jerry Gorman are the people that, you know, Mike Henry, we have a lawsuit against him right now, the village does, against Mike Henry. Mike Henry has sent over 200 FOIAs to us. He sent me, I literally could fill 2 Costco paper boxes with the emails that have been sent to me from him and various lawsuits. He's filed dozens of lawsuits, all tossed. So he's a felon. He's convicted of threatening a federal judge and spent time in prison. He pled guilty to threatening a public official at the IRS. He most recently was convicted of misdemeanor littering for distributing flyers in Tinley Park and Evergreen Park. They accused a police officer of pedophilia and a family fraud, okay? Since 2019, he's filed complaints accusing over 93 different people of 42 different crimes. I'm included in just about every one of those, but 93 different people have been accused, okay? He's filed complaints with the State Board of Elections, the FEC, the ARDC, the Public Integrity Unit of the Illinois Attorney General, the Cook County State's Attorney, the Illinois Attorney General, EPA, OSHA, IRS, and several U.S. district and county courts. I've had to deal with, Bill's dealt with a lot of them. I've been in every one that I've had to deal with. And in court, he admitted he only does the robocalls, he does not rate them. So, I know it's a bit of a long-winded thing, but.
So, why has there not been an outreach to the people who feel that these phone calls are harassment? I mean, it's different than advertising robocalls, and I actually asked that question, but it's interesting that if they have a summary that leads to a person who's at least the voice behind this, relevant or not to whoever's writing them, how come the people in the village who are receiving these calls have never been asked to step up?
So we don't know who's receiving them other than them telling us, like the Swansons telling us that they're receiving them. File a complaint. I tell people file a complaint with the FCC. The problem is this is civil. It's not criminal. Almost all the calls, none of them have crossed what we've been told have crossed the criminal line. They're all civil. So for me to do something about it, I have to go file a big defamation suit. It's got to be any money. I'm going to spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to what end? I can't reach out because I don't know who's getting. I know multiple people are getting them because people ask me this question all the time. I'm tired of dealing with the questions. To be blunt, they go after me personally. They go after my family personally. But there's the village. I mean, we've been in court since what 2020 on this, and literally we haven't got past square one. He's filed a lawsuit against every judge that gets assigned, and then the judge recuses themselves because we're in Cook County, so we get nothing. So we continue to do this. Now, here's the other thing with the Mormons. We know they're connected to Scott Casper and Ray Hanania, both through donations, through articles that Scott Casper publishes a newsletter called Illinois Review. Ray Hanania obviously has his blog. they attack us constantly. If you get the robocalls and you go look at their articles, they're almost timed exactly the same. Okay.
Would you still, like, if I got a robocall, would you still?
We want to know. We want to know if you got it. If file a complaint with the FCC, maybe if they get enough complaints, they'll actually investigate it. So the problem we have is if it doesn't cross the criminal line, we can't look at it, right? So there's social media posts attack it, and I played these robocalls during the State of the Village, so you can go hear them. But there were letters sent to my donors accusing my wife of finding kids for me, and I'm a pedophile. To my donors for Congress. In the primary, who did I run against? Scott Casper. Who ran against? There were attacks against Trustee Katsinas. Who did she run against? Liz Gorman. Attacks against Sean Morrison. Who did he run against? Liz Gorman. Doesn't take that. And if you recall the mailers you got, it was nothing but accusing Sean Morrison of pedophilia. So you see a trend here. It's very disturbing. Okay. So and they've continued. So they've absolutely continued since that time. They've gone after Rich Miller, and who was a member of our ESDA. He ran for the fire district. They went after him. And the reason I did this in the State of the Village, the reason I'm talking about it like here now, it's going to continue.
So I'm not looking to deepen the issue in any, but would it not be something that would be available to address to the Orland Park residents? I understand you don't know who's getting the calls, but the commonality of this, I would like to be an informed citizen.
I've addressed it. State of the Village, I talked about it for 20 minutes. You think I want to talk about calls where I'm called a pedophile, where my wife is attacked, my kids are attacked? I'm done, right? If people buy into this, and so we're not bringing more light to it. It's unfortunate, it's something we have to deal with. Quite frankly, the fact that you're asking the question, I'm answering it, there's going to be additional robocalls this week, because it's what they want to do.
Well, my point is that, I think people have had an acknowledgement of how to independently address it because of our choice to follow up on these calls, and the fact that we are not appreciative of them. But I'm not aware until this point of any action I could individually take.
We put it on social media. I've talked about it. I talked about it at the State of the Village. You file a complaint with the FCC, you can let the police department know. That's basically what you do. Some people send it to me. I mean, that's what we do. At the end of the day, it's unfortunate. We have to deal with it. If we're in Cook County, the courts don't act very quickly. I think eventually we will get there, but I don't know when that eventually is. And no one, I can tell you, no one wants to stop it more than me and my family. So.
Is that Rick Henry, the village president?
He is.
Can I change the subject?
Yes. I'm not going to talk about this anymore.
I just had one quick question that I saw up there, you had a finance thing. I just recently had a neighbor tell me Orland broke. And I said, I never heard that. I haven't heard that. And she's like, oh no, they're broke. They're so broke. And I'm like, where are you getting that from? So
we're not broke, but I'll go through the finance section because it kind of ties to the question about Centennial Park West, and it's important. We just finally approved the capital plan this last board meeting. We've been talking about it, we put it publicly. I talked about it in the State of the Village here. We've been getting it out there because it's important. I think they'll have an apt comment, which I'll somewhat share later. So I'll go through this whole section. So when I arrived in 2017 in June, I received this on the left, this chart on the left. That number shows our operating reserves, which the target for the village is to keep 20% reserves, okay? The 2017 preliminary number had us at about 24%, with the 2018 budget at 22% desired reserve. But the projections were that by this year, we would have blown through our reserves and we would be at -8%. What that means is we would have been borrowing for operating expenses. Okay? That's what that means. I saw that, needless to say, I was less than happy. Exactly. I had some choice words. But I said, how long have you known? Since 2012. And they were taking no action to fix it. So we took a lot of action. We cut operating expenditures, we cut some people, we cut a few programs, but nothing serious. We modified programs, made it cheaper to do. We did a lot of stuff. This is our actual reserves. So in 2022, we actually had 48.1% reserves instead of the projected 2% because of the changes we made. What that allowed us to do, and the reason it's 23% in the 2023 budget, is we took $18 million of our reserve and used it for capital projects. Because remember I showed you the picture on the roads and how far behind we were? Those are the things that we were the same way with parks. We were fixing one park every 2 years, okay? And that, we have 66 parks, obviously 132 years to get through your parks doesn't work, right? So we invested a lot of money in our parks and roads to try to catch up. So at the same time we did that, we lowered our debt about $24 million at the same time. So how have we done that? We did that by insourcing things we should, outsourcing things we should. We've made a lot of investments in IT. In fact, we're pretty much there as far as all of our IT projects. We restructured our debt, we reduced staff, we created a lot of more operational efficiency. So we've done a lot of work. There's really no more blood to squeeze out of there. No more blood to squeeze out of this turnip. I mean, we've squeezed the orange as much as we can. There's no more juice coming out of it. Okay. Oops. Let's see if this is going to work. Maybe I'll put that up on the shelf there. So we face a bunch of challenges. There's a lot of state unfunded mandates. One of them, Safety Act, body cameras, $1 million a year. You know, so things, and we want body cams, but it's still an unfunded mandate. Another unfunded mandate is this part-time mandatory PTO for part-time workers. It's almost a $500,000 hit to the village because we got good lifeguards hit, you know, summer lifeguards paid time off. Okay. The future state budget crisis. The budget's already in trouble this year because they don't have COVID money anymore. So there's more threat to that for us. Disparity of funding that we get. Pension costs, which we have no control over. The Tier 2, which made it a lot better. I won't go into the details of that. They're already pushing and trying to go back to Tier 1 with some of that stuff, which would, all the savings we got for Tier 2 is going to cost us more. Backlog of capital improvements. I already told you about roads and parks, everything. Buildings, everything. So inflation, recession, all things that we're dealing with, right? So there's this fund called the Local Government Distributed Fund. 10% of, historically, since 1969 when income tax was put in, the state agreed to share with municipalities on a per capita basis 10% of their receipts. So they would say, this is how many people are in Illinois, this is 10%, here's your share, and we would get it based on our population, okay? That was from 1969 to 2011. In 2011, when they hiked taxes, that was when they put in the tax increase from 3 to 5%. They cut our share of the LGDF to 6% from 10. It's fluctuated slightly since then. This year they said, oh, we gave some back. It's at 6.4% now. Okay. This is the amount of money that we did not get on the left-hand side through 2022. Okay. Through 2027, it's another $5.5 million a year we're not getting. It's a total of about $46 million. Now, with the recent bump they gave, so it's actually $44 million that we have not gotten from the state, that historically we got from the state, okay? You throw in ARPA, so ARPA was the COVID money. That 1,250 towns in Illinois got $136 a person. Like 46 towns had a different funding formula that got paid directly. Because of our size, we were paid directly. We thought that was good because the state gave us nothing the first time around. So we thought, oh, this will be good. Not so much. So their funding formula was based on a few different things. But we got $86 a person, which the average in the state was $136. Of the 46 towns, we got the least amount of money. Chicago got $695 a person. So they basically, I mean, they put a number on it. Our congressman Newman, Cassie, and all voted for this. The people of Chicago are worth 8 times more than the people of Orland Park. Never mind, they put a number on that. Oak Park is smaller than Orland Park, okay, by about 5,000 people. They got $38 million. We got 5. So Evanston, you can see what they got. I don't think it takes a genius to figure out how the formula was made up, okay? So that's a shortfall we didn't get. So how are we going to pay for these capital projects, right? Then you have decisions that we made here. Orland Health and Fitness. We've spent $6.6 million already since I've been mayor to fix it. $6.5 million more between the next 4 years, so $13 million for that facility. Because they were going to shut it down, so they didn't spend any money on it the previous 7 or 8 years. Now, you can make an argument that $13 million, we got a pool, we got all this stuff, and maybe that was money we should have spent. The problem is, the board they didn't know. They just took it and said, we'll just deal with it. I think it's important to know what your expenditures are so that you can make an informed decision. We didn't do that. Tinley Creek is a project that in 2014, we had funding from MWRD to do. It requires easements. Some residents didn't want to give easements, so the then administration did not want to kind of force them and try and eminent domain to get those easements. Again, we're talking easements, they still own the property, but there's a creek that runs behind it. It's eroding. Some of the homes are close to falling into that creek. Well, now, 8 years later, water being what it is, the project is bigger because more people are affected, and MWRD won't give us any more money. So now we have a $4 million cost that we have to absorb because we weren't willing to make just tell people, hey, this is the way it is. We have to do it. We're doing this now. We've got like 10 holdouts, and we're doing everything we can because we need to make sure we keep that money. Otherwise, we're going to have to pay for the whole thing because they're not going to fix it, even though it's on their property. It's too expensive. Triangle, the 143rd and Grange, we've lost $31 million on it. So when they created that TIF in 2003, they had no plan, which is a bad idea for a TIF. I'm not going to go into how TIFs work, but you need to have a plan because you get basically it freezes property taxes, and any additional property tax you get from new buildings goes into the project. So you want to build as soon as you possibly can. We had no plan. They took the money and they bought out businesses. The ones that were friends got good deals. The ones that weren't friends didn't get such good deals, and there was more arguments. Eventually, they used a threat of eminent domain to get the last parcel, which was the strip center, to sell. 10 years later, we had nothing. So we put $64 million into an apartment complex. We spent the money. We ended up losing 7 on that. University of Chicago is a non-profit. They wanted to come here. They had 2 other places they were looking. They didn't. We basically went in and undercut private landowners to put that building there. Here's the problem, it's a not-for-profit. Remember I said property tax is what goes back into it? They don't pay anything. You never put a non-for-profit in a TIF, bad idea. So all of those ideas were minus $31 million there. So that's LaGrange Road landscaping, we paid for that. The landscaping and hardscaping and all that brick, it's beautiful. $18 million. Plus about 600 to 700 grand a year to maintain it. Bowley Farm, we took that on. We have to spend $2.4 million to restore it. The Open Lands Fund was for restoration, maintenance, and purchase. They used it all for purchase, and all of the restoration ended up in kind of our laps. So these are some bad decisions. Here's the worst decision. How many of you were here when we were getting rebates? Everyone's, oh, we're getting a $150 check. You remember when you got it? In March, right before the election. This is a chart. The blue numbers are the rebate. The red numbers is the amount of debt we took out each of the years we did a rebate. We were borrowing money to give you property tax money back and paying interest on it. So we gave you $39 million in tax rebates and paid $18 million in interest, roughly. $57 million bucks.
I thought the mall paid for that.
No. The mall didn't pay for that. We borrowed every year. You can see how much we borrowed each of those years, and that was the rebate number. So we basically used your credit card to give you money back, which you would never do yourself. But that's what we did. So we have $198 million of capital projects to do between now and 2027. $106 million of that is, I've already showed you this, the major capital projects, firing range. This is Public Works, which was built like in early 1990s. So there's a lot of expansion and things that need to be done because there's things that are completely need to be redone because the building. I showed you shows you the rec building. Those are some big projects that we have. So the LGEF shortfall and the ARPA shortfall combined is $77 million in shortfall. We have $106 million of capital. So there's a $29 million gap. I showed you our debt numbers. We could actually cover that with debt if we had to, which is actually using debt for capital projects makes sense. It's like your house, you build the police firing range, you don't put $10 million in front, you can actually pay that down a little bit over time because it's a building. So we could actually, with just the federal stuff that we've been shorted, we could cover those costs. Here's the financial decision we made. Property tax rebates, interest on rebates, the triangle, and Tinley Creek. Those are non-debatable bad decisions. Okay? So that's what, 57, 88, 92 million bucks. LaGrange Landscape, you can make an argument that some of that looks good. I would make the argument that it's probably overdone, and we should have spent 18 million on it. But Oral Health and Fitness, same thing. You can make an argument. I can make an argument either way, whether you get it or not. But if you didn't do all those things, you would actually have 17 million extra available to do all of our capital projects. We would have to do nothing. But as we sit, we are $106 million short of needed capital projects. Not for running our operations, but for fixing our roads, fixing our parks. Our choice of the board is to let that stuff deteriorate and kick it down the road or address it. We decided to address it. So, we did, for the last 5 years, we have studied our buildings, we know exactly what we need to spend. Our vehicles, the average age was 14 years. We need to get our vehicle fleet up to speed. Our roads, our parks, we've done assessments on everything. We know what our needs are, okay? So what the board decided is that we made some tax decisions. So on Tuesday, we increased home rule sales tax 0.5%. Because over 60% of our tax revenue from home rule sales tax is from people not in our apartment. So we're trying to shift the burden a little bit to people who visit here and away from us. We put in a utility tax, so Nicor and ComEd. We're about the only town around, I think the only other one that doesn't have one is Mokina. And essentially the other thing this helps us do is it helps diversify away from the state, because there's a possibility the state takes more of our money. As they get more broke, they may take more of our money. This will allow us to fund our capital. Because mixing in some debt, we have a lot of debt capacity and still keep a very high bond rating and borrow at a very low rate. And the other thing we said is, okay, how do we shift some of that burden away from our residents? So we got rid of the stickers, which cost us a little bit of money, but stickers aren't paying for everybody and they're expensive to administer. And we're also going to lower property tax. So our property taxes will be, our goal is to keep it less than 5% of your overall bill. Right now it's about, I think, 6.2%. So we're trying to give our property tax owners, or our owners, basically trying to offset that and get more out-of-towners. And also utility tax also affects renters.
Have you gotten any feedback from the car dealers on that 0.5%? Because
so car dealers, so title goods are not affected.
okay.
Home rule sales tax, groceries, pharmacies, and capital or title goods are not impacted by home rule sales tax. So restaurants, retail. So it's basically 50 cents on $100. It's basically what it is.
Do you know, on average, what a utility tax will add to a bill?
We had it in our presentations for the village. I don't know off the top of my head. It was something like
$12.53 for both.
a combined $12.53. So Trustee Katsinas joined us, so she had an answer for that. So
Per bill?
no, per bill. Yeah,
As long as you're on
for
the
both.
property taxes, what the heck is up with the property assessment that came, this, holy cow.
Well, people keep voting in Fritz Kagan to the assessor's office. I mean, every mayor I know has pushed back on these because it's happening everywhere. You Democrat, Republican alike, but they keep voting in someone who wants to raise, assessments. Now, assessments don't necessarily mean that's your bill, but if you notice, the assessments in suburban areas are going way up. Assessments in the cities are not going way up, so that they're shifting even more of the burden to the suburbs. That's exactly what they're doing, and the businesses are worse.
Who's doing that? Is that the government, the county? Who's that?
That's
state?
No, that's Fritz Kagan, the assessor, Cook County assessor.
Because it was shocking.
Yeah, mine went up 52%. But businesses are seeing over 100%, and their taxes are already through the roof. So it's a problem, a huge problem. So I recommend we have June 21st.
June 21st.
In the Civic Center, we have, it's here, June 21st here. Well, not a lot of it. I don't know if there's enough room here. But we will have folks here from the county to help assist you with appealing. I recommend everyone appeal. That's the best I can tell you. We don't have any control over it, but it's a problem for everybody. Now, just because your assessment went up 50%, your taxes will not go up 50%, but you'll have to just kind of see.
Definitely going to affect the tax bill.
It's going to affect the tax bill, but you don't know how it's going to affect the tax bill because of how taxes are levied. We levy a fixed dollar amount. Pardon me, we levy a fixed dollar amount, so you've got a pie. All of the valuations of everyone in this room, everyone in the town, everyone in this taxing district of Orland Park, they add all of that up. Okay? And they say this is how much the total value is. Your value is some very minute percentage of that. They apply that percentage to our total levied dollar amount. And that's what you get, that's what your property tax for the village is. Okay? So it really matters how your assessment goes relative to everywhere else. Where the burden's getting shifted is the Cook County taxes, which is a small part of your bill. More of it's going to fall into Orland Park because we've got higher assessments in the city. That's the biggest impact it's going to have. The other thing it impacts is how much the school boards can levy. We can levy whatever, so it doesn't impact us. School boards have a maximum they can do, and they always go get the maximum. Their maximum is going to be higher. So that's where it's going to really impact your bill. It's very complicated. It's complicated for a reason, so that it makes it hard for you to figure out. So all I can say is appeal them.
So June 21st, will that require an appointment for individuals?
No, it's everyone's here. They'll give you a form and they'll walk you through how to do it. You want to have your tax bill with you. I think that's about pretty much all you need. Bring your tax bill. So you have your PIN number and all that.
You might have to use the cancer cutting for this.
Yeah, I know. Well, again, you talk about some things like, the calls, right? And I've talked about it dozens of times, and yet people still don't hear about it. So, this has been advertised everywhere when we have this many people here. So, right. So anyway, so we made the decision. I think one of our trustees who's sitting here today said, I'll put it in nicer terms. He said, we just ate a crap sandwich. It doesn't taste real good. But, and there's not a single person on this board, we are all extremely fiscally conservative. Not a single person on this board that wants to do this, believe me. I mean, you look at the history of the decisions that were made, we just don't have a choice. Well, we have a choice. The choice is not do projects, not do roads, not do parks. And people could make the argument not do the concert venue. That's a fair argument. But the same thing about Orland Health and Fitness, you make that argument too. At least you're getting something for that. You're getting nothing for the other things that you did, right? So capital project, this is not going to fund our operating. It's not going to fund our police. It's going to fund the police training facility. It's going to get the public works facility up to speed so we can keep all of our salt trucks indoors, which they're diesel. So if you don't do that, they can't start, right? So it's all of these types of things. And at the same time, fix Dugan Park, because frankly, as a resident, if I'm going to have to pay $12 a month on my utility bill, I would like to see something for it besides just resurfacing my road, right? And so, and that's why we're getting rid of some of the buildings like the museum, because they're just too expensive to keep. You know, we're trying to balance all of that. We've worked really hard to make sure we have all the facts, we know exactly what we need to spend, so there's not surprises. So we're not spending $13 million on Orland Health and Fitness, they have no idea. So we developed the fact base and we did it, and the nice thing is that this, so this is the tax rate right now, so we're 6.6% of the total tax bill. Our goal is to get that under 5%. And this should allow us to do that. So again, we're trying to take some of the burden off of it on the property tax side, what we can do. So as a result of these changes, we got the police training facility, we get to update our work garage, we get the water redundancy project. Our local roads will be best in class, which I think we want. I want living here. I've driven in other towns, I want our roads to be in good shape. And I've driven in parts of town where the roads aren't in good shape right now, and we want to get there. ADA compliance, I didn't talk about that. We assessed all of our sidewalks, every single one of them. And we have a 5-year plan, actually, we think we're getting done in 2 years to get all those, so all the trip hazards are on. Why? Because we get sued if someone trips, right? So those things have never been done. So we're trying to make sure we get all the curbing, and ADA has changed. So ADA compliance issues. So all those roads where you see now, where you see the cutouts, where you can wheel right through there, and you have the little, red plate with the, that's all ADA compliance stuff. So we're putting all that in as well. So we're getting everything, as part of this, we're getting everything to where it needs to be. Major park upgrades, we've got John Humphrey, Centennial West Schuessler Park, which is being done. And I can show you a picture of that. Dugan Park, like we talked about, it also makes us less reliant on the state. If the state does make more cuts, it will hurt us a little bit, but we will be able to absorb more of it if we have to. Hopefully that doesn't happen, hopefully that cuts. I get that every mayor in the state is pushing for a full restoration of LGDF this year. And we have a majority of senators and legislators that wanted to do it. It was stopped by the governor and the leader of the House and the leader of the Senate. They stopped it from being any higher.
Full restoration of what?
The LGDF. You showed up late, but the local government distributed fund. It was 10% in 1969 through 2011. It was lowered to 6. Now it's at 6.4. It's from 2011 to 2027. It's $74 million in funding we didn't get. And you think of us, we can absorb it. Think about Harvey and Posen. They use that money to pay for their police and the fire. They've cut their police and fire to near nothing, right? So that's why we don't have a fire department. We have a district, so it's not part of the roads. But for those towns, and their problem is that they can't fix their roads. And so, and that feeds into, that becomes a problem. If their towns deteriorate, the towns next to them deteriorate. It keeps putting pressure on everybody else. So it's bad for us. It's absolutely horrendous for the poor communities. So, and we're positioned to pay as you go. By 2030, we will be in a position where we can basically pay for all of our capital. We'll have all of the backlog of capital, all these projects that have been put off for so long, we'll have them all done. And we will have a steady state to keep things maintained. And so we'll be able to pay as we go and not have these. Now, future boards, by that time I'll be term limited, I'll be off the board, but future boards will have the ability to pay as you go. It's going to be up to us and voters to make sure we don't let people that decide it's a piggy bank again and do something like the Triangle or try and buy a golf course or something like that. So that's but we're trying, as a board, we've decided, hey, we're trying to make sure we do the right thing for the long term so that Orland Park is set up for the long term future. So the only other thing I guess I could show you, because we mentioned it, Schuessler Park. I'm happy to say there haven't been a lot of police questions because I think everybody here understands how safe we are here.
I do have a comment about the police department. Shout out for them. Whenever we go on a trip, we take advantage of the house Watch program. It's wonderful. Once
And that's a call for service that I showed you earlier.
Yes, once every shift, we have a police officer checking our front door. He or she goes around, checks the back door. It's a great program. It makes us feel secure when we're gone.
So here's Schuessler Park, and we did a public survey on this. And Schuessler Park was the park that was like 65 or 70% of the people said needs to be redone. It was their #1 priority. Anyone who knows it floods and everything else. The history of Schuessler Park is it was donated. It was the first land donated by a developer, the then mayor, which was a Schuessler. He got the developer to donate the land as part of that subdivision. So
Where
from
is
land.
that exactly?
What's that?
Where is that exactly?
88 in Poplar.
Oh.
So it was the major park in Orland Park until Centennial was built. Centennial and John Humphrey were built. So when I was a kid growing up, when Bonnie was a kid growing up, it was the major park. So it was built by volunteers. So the then trustee, Mel Dugan, who became mayor later, worked in construction and got a bunch of big equipment, and they came out and moved the dirt, and they created baseball fields, and sod was donated from the sod farm. The hardware store donated fencing, and they built these fields. And they were fields I played on as a kid. It wasn't engineered, it wasn't planned, any of that. And then now it has a sledding hill. That was because that's where we used, the village dumped its dirt pile for a while, so it became a sledding hill, okay? That's the history. The problem is, what land do you think the developer gave us? The worst land, right? So it's very sloppy, very wet. Over time, the pond is filled up with sediment, and it gets very wet, and oftentimes the fields are unusable because they're so wet. We want to redevelop it. Second thing is that for those of you who have watched closely, I've talked about the need for. We basically took a football program. So I played the first Pioneer football game, 1974. And of all of our youth programs, the football team never has had a field that was designed for them. Even though they were around, they were put on baseball fields at John Humphrey, which are baseball fields. And anyone who knows anything about football, it trashes an outfield for baseball. So we said, hey, if we're going to redo this park, let's give them a place that's designed for them. It can be used by anybody. But during football season, it'll be focused, that's where they'll practice and play. Well, they play their games pretty much at Sanford. The other thing is that it's a great place to have turf fields for a couple of reasons. One is we can store water underneath turf fields for drainage. Can't do that for grass fields. So part of turf fields is there's gravel there, so you can put storage of capacity underneath there. So that's what we're doing here. We're expanding the lake. We're putting storage capacity, and you're going to have 2 full-size fields, which meets the needs of the football program. Also, non-football season can be used by soccer, lacrosse, everybody else. So there'll be access to the fields for the public. There's a whole push on that because there's a fence around it. I said, yeah, there's a fence, but there's still access. We have fences around softball fields. You can still get into them. What we don't want is we don't want vehicles to get in there and be able to trash the fields and damage them. We're trying to keep vandal out. We're actually going to name that complex the Michael Schofield III sports complex, and that portion of the complex. And I don't know if you know who Michael Schofield is. Was a Bears player last year, been in the NFL for 10 years. He was Sandberg grad, went to Michigan. His dad is the fire district, or the fire chief, has been for a long time. Long-time family here. He's married to Kendall Coyne, who was the captain of the women's hockey team, women's U.S. Olympic hockey team. She's also a Sandberg grad. They live here in Orland. So there's going to be some displays for the kids and things like that. Some ideas have been thrown out as, showing Mike as a Pioneer player in his size and his uniform, as a Sandberg player, and then as a Chicago Bear, so these kids can see that it can happen, right? And then the other thing is they're helping us raise money for an ADA playground at that location as well. So that's part of the future plan for that. And they're going to add parking, which it needs. Has a lot of parking. Has the third most parking of any park that we have right now, but they're going to add some more to handle the inflow and outflow for football practice. So that's getting redone. That's already broken ground. They're already doing stuff there. So, and that'll be ready for play next year. as will the concert facility that'll be ready. We believe that it's going to open for our first concerts next year. So, and Taste of Lawn and everything will be there next year. Sure.
Hey, question for you. So we noticed that you are developing parks and all. I just was wondering, do you all think you will be having pickleball courts?
So you might have got here a little late. Newman Park, which is yeah. So the cultural center, when we're going to get rid of the cultural center because it's $6 million to restore that building. We did offer it to the schools because they need space, and they're spending more than that to add space to their other schools. So we offered it to them. They decided they didn't want it. We decided rather than sell it, we're going to just expand the park. Part of the expanding the park is adding pickleball courts. Every tennis court in town is also lined for pickleball, but this one's going to be designed a little bit with lighting as well. So we are adding that, and I think I have something here on parks which we talked about. This gives you an idea. So.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So looking back to 2007, this is the amount of parks we renovated from 2007 and 2018. Like I said, we were renovating one every other year. Okay, which was 66 parks. It's over a century to get them all, which obviously doesn't work. So what we did is we assessed, like everything else, we did an assessment. We said, what's in poor condition? Everything you see in orange there is considered in poor condition. That was accessibility, general condition, and security. So over this 5-year period, we have addressed all of that. Instead of doing one park totally, we've gone into the individual parks and assessed what needed and fixed what needed to be fixed. And we were able to get, and we doubled the spending that we did on it, but we were able to address a lot of parks. Now we're doing another assessment, and since we've already addressed the ADA issues and the security issues, we're focusing almost entirely on the condition of the park now for future investments. But again, just like the roads, it started in 2019 is where we did that. So since 2020, when we approved this in late 2019, we've added 23 pavilions, added or replaced. We've done major park renovations in 22 parks, so as opposed to 2, which would have been the plan before. We've resurfaced 23 basketball courts. We did the John Humphrey Complex, tennis and pickleball, 17 we've resurfaced. Bocce ball courts, we've redone 8 of those. 2 volleyball courts. We're also doing Centennial Park West, Schuylkill Park, and we're adding batting cages to John Humphrey and to Centennial Park. So that's what we've done in parks just in the last 4 years. So we've done all of that, and you remember I showed you all the savings we did through, that's how we did it. But unfortunately, we still had these capital projects we couldn't fund. What other questions?
I've heard rumor that actually the village now owns the Andrew Court property.
That's not true. It was purchased though. It was purchased from CommScope by someone, and they're working on their plans. I've seen their plans. Sometimes it's premature for me to say anything until they submit, but in this particular case, basically it's a town hall project, and it includes cleanup of the site. Right now, it's clean to a commercial standard. You could put businesses there, but you can't put housing. But it would have to be clean to the housing standards. So it's a good project, but it's it's townhomes. If you think of the townhomes across the street from it, it's actually slightly less density than the townhomes across the street. So they originally came with apartments. We said, So the board's position on apartments, people ask us a lot. We actually had, 2018, the highest % of home ownership, owner-occupied units in the whole country for over 20,000 units, okay? So very high ownership. Our view on apartments is, and we've told this to developers, is that if you can build them by right, because sometimes you have zoning rights to build that density, then you can build them. Otherwise, we're not inclined to approve them unless it's associated with some other project that makes sense. So an example is, think of Pep Boys. Pep Boys is 159. There's property behind it, goes to 94th Avenue, so all around it. they want to do commercial along the range and 143rd, and they want to do apartments behind it, and there's apartments right behind that. That's a place where we could probably accept if we got commercial along the, because no one's ever going to build a single family back in there. There's no way they can make money on it, number one. And number two, it's up against 94th Avenue where there's already apartments already there. So that's a place where it kind of makes sense, right? That's a place where we might like it. But by and large, we pretty much say no, because we get every week people want to build those apartments.
I worked at that place in Orland for the old Andrew back in '95, and that's when they had temporary. I worked in a trailer actually over there.
Okay.
And I thought that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that land is unfit for a number of years.
So it's been cleaned. It's got an NFR letter, which is a basically means it's cleaned. It's cleaned to a commercial standard. Like I said, they can put businesses there. They can put a business park on it.
Yeah, but not single family.
Not single family. There's more cleanup. I think they estimated $9 million in cleanup. So there is cleanup. There's a couple different locations on that property that need to be cleaned up. It's not the whole property. So.
Who pays for that?
So that will probably, remember we talked about TIF?
Yeah.
Okay. So TIF monies, essentially it freezes the property tax. Right now they're not paying much because it's empty, right? So it freezes the property tax to all the tax values for up to 23 years. And then when things get built, they get a property tax bill, and whatever that difference between the cap and that goes into the project. Okay? But it has to be spent on public infrastructure. So it can be spent on parks, it can be spent on roads, sewers. There's certain things it has to be spent on. It can't be spent on building their homes, right? Spent on other stuff. One of the things it can be spent on is cleanup. So the reality is we probably have to do a TIF there. And I think it's in the village's interest to do that. We want that area cleaned up. It's in the village's interest to TIF that property and do that and provide that assistance.
Andrew's not responsible for any of it?
Andrew has cleaned it up. They've got a letter already that is cleared to a commercial letter, commercial standard. So they've cleaned it to that level that the state considered good enough, and that's not something the village can control. But to go to residential, it has to be cleaned more. The developer wants to go to residential, and so in our opinion, it's in our interest to take those property taxes from that project and use it towards the cleanup.
So like with gas stations, they have to have 7 years of tanks out of the ground before they can do anything.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's clean to a business. Businesses can go in there, residents, it needs more cleanup. So, but I think we all agree that it's probably in the village's interest to assist in that. But that doesn't impact us. That TIF doesn't really impact you in any way. Because 23 years from now, when the TIF is over, now they're going to be on the tax rolls, right? So, and there's no money coming. The only money that comes out of the village is if they have to borrow against that TIF, and then the TIF pays it back. So that's it. But the TIF covers all of that. But sometimes what the village will do is they'll borrow to do the infrastructure, and then, but the TIF monies that are generated pay off that note. You know, but if you don't have a project, so we borrowed the TIF we currently have. We didn't have a project. So we put in all these streets, and there's no money to pay that off, so we end up paying it off. So as long as there's a plan and it's developed, then it's not an issue. The Orland Park Place used a TIF, it was great. It worked out great for the residents with taxing bodies. The Triangle, not so much. Any other questions?
I did not follow up on the discussion about the roundabout proposal. The one that exists already on 153rd, I think it is.
151st, what's happening?
I'm sorry. It is, I don't want to ask this one. Is there a reason that they are looking to do more of that? Is it traffic congestion and movement? And is that all funding through Orland Park, or?
It's not going to be all through Orland Park, but certain intersections. So this intersection out front here, I think anyone who works here can tell you they used to stack up on a four-way, and the roundabout's great. Now it's not so great when I've had someone going the wrong way on it. It's not so great, but those issues notwithstanding, traffic moves much, much better through there. West Avenue and 151st was a done deal when I kind of got here. And if you look at future projections of the traffic because of Payless or now Northwestern, that is potentially a high traffic area, which that's why they did it. I feel bad for the folks on the corner of the house, but quite frankly, they have the same problem with the four-way intersection as well. There's a lot of traffic on that corner. The one that we're looking at doing, 153rd, it's already been approved. So what we're talking about now, with the meeting that's coming up next week, I think, engineering. Oh, did they have it already? Okay, so they're talking about the phase 1 engineering of that project. Okay, and we looked at it, and actually the staff didn't want to recommend the roundabout because people pushed back on the roundabout and complained. And the board actually said, tell us what the best solution is. We can't keep making decisions based on the fact that people don't understand it, are upset by it. We have to also look at what's the best solution. Well, the reality is roundabouts reduce, so here's why they go to roundabouts. It moves way more traffic safely. It reduces, I can't remember the exact number, but significantly reduces the number of contact points between vehicles because you don't have left turns going across intersections. It also reduces vehicle pedestrian interfaces as well because of the left turn traffic and all that. So, they've been proven to be way safer, far less accidents, and they move a much higher volume of traffic. Well, that particular intersection at 153rd sometimes comes close to backing up to the Range Road down. That will stop that in the future. And so the other options were, because the intersection needs to be redone regardless. And so there were some options of a stoplight, but then you have to acquire land and you have to create another turn lane. And you have to, a right-hand turn lane. And so there's all these other things that had to go in there. And said, well, if a roundabout's only $400,000 more expensive and it moves this much more traffic, doesn't it solve our problem for the long term? So we don't have to redo it again? Are we gonna have to redo this? I think the question was, are we gonna have to redo this in 10 or 15 years after we do it? They said, yeah, probably. Like, well, why do we do that? Let's do it once and do it right. We've been all about let's try and do it once and do it right. I'd rather spend 500 grand more to your point. Orland Park's not broke, okay? Yes, we had to make these decisions, but we're not broke. We can still, it's important to make smart long-term decisions, not short or cash-strapped decisions, because we're not, right? So it's better to spend $500,000 extra now and not have to spend $3 million 10 years from now, right? And so that's kind of the way we look at everything. Let's make the best long-term decision for everything.
A roundabout on Pine Street, and it's east of.
Those aren't roundabouts. Those are planters put in the middle of an intersection.
And with four-way stop.
I know.
Why?
That was way before us, and
you understand it, but can you take out the stop signs? They're not necessary.
So, well, our department looks at stop signs very closely and intersection collisions, and so they're in there for a reason. That we turn down probably 95% of stop sign requests. Okay, if we put one in there, it's because the data shows it. So the data shows that it needed one. So the problem is for that intersection, there was a trustee that lived over there that visited someplace and just loved these things, and so they put them in. Like there's like 10 or so in that area, and they're dumb. They're not roundabouts. They're basically a planter. You've seen it in Chicago if you haven't been over in the Orland Park area. They're basically a planter in the middle of a four-way intersection. That's what they are. They're stupid. They're stupid. So, but the roundabouts we're doing, like here in front of Village Hall at 153rd, they do move more traffic. They take a little getting used to, but they move way more traffic. And I can tell you, I go through that 153rd and Ravinia Light a lot, and there's a lot of traffic there, and there's going to be more.
So then there'll be a roundabout on 151st and West and on 153rd and West.
153rd and Ravinia.
Oh, Ravinia. Okay.
No plan to change the intersection of 153rd. That's the only other roundabout that we're aware of that's in the long-term plans. Is the one we're already engineering.
I may have missed it in the first 15 minutes that I missed. What's the current business vacancy rate?
I don't know the exact number, but we're pretty good. It's not something that we're concerned about. Kind of normal course of businesses. Sure, some of the strip centers we know are struggling, have been struggling for a while. We have 12 million square feet of retail. The push for us long term is we're trying to make sure that our core stays healthy. So the mall, you know, if you think the core 143rd to say 163rd, and then Harlem to LaGrange and 159, those core areas have to stay healthy, right? Outlying retail centers can potentially be redeveloped into something else. So, because we're going to have less retail over time, I think we all know that the boxes are getting smaller and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what we pay attention to is, you know, obviously we still have Sears, but if you think about it, I was 8 months into my term when we lost Sears, Carson's Home Goods, Babies R Us, and Toys R Us in the same month. And Toys R Us, by the way, was the #1 Toys R Us store in the whole of North America. So it wasn't that and Carson's was like number 3 or 4, it's just that the whole thing went up. The fact that we've redeveloped all that except for the Sears is pretty good, and we actually had a plan in place already. We were ahead of it. I could go into all the details, but that's why we got Mauer so quickly and all that. So Orland's doing great. We still got a lot of things coming, but the one problem with big spaces is that there's not a lot of big stores left, and we have them all, just about. It's really hard to fill big spaces.
Now, are there businesses on the village books that are coming in? I know somebody was supposed to move into where the International House of Pancakes was.
Yeah, there's a Wild Fork, which is going there, which is a specialty meat and grocery store. So I have a thing on economic development.
You know when Pete's is supposed to be finished?
Who? Pete's next year is supposed to open.
Next year?
Yeah. They got hung up into supply chain issues and all that. So these are some of the projects we have had and have coming. So Pete's Fresh Market 2024. Obviously, we just had a PGA Superstore open. Wild Fork is the one going to the IHOP. Steinhoff is taking Bed Bath & Beyond and Steinmart. So a giant furniture store. 93,000 square feet, I think. 43 Orland Square Mall and 82 Orland Square. Those are the 2 Robert Morris buildings. They're both medical office redevelopments. One has a cardiovascular, one has an oncology group going in there, and you can see they've been working on those. Silver Cross, 171st and LaGrange, going in with 46,000 square feet. That's under construction right now. With another 46,000, I think, to add. Hampton Inn, right behind Rock Bottom Brewery there, going to open soon, I think in the next month or so. Here's the big thing with hotels. They have so many rooms. Every room has to be inspected almost like a house, right, for safety and electric. So there's a lot. You think about 150 rooms, it's a lot of inspection for our inspectors. So that was actually an eye-opener for me because it's the first one we've done is the inspection issue we have at the time because we have to inspect all these other properties too. That property is just so big. You have, well, BMW expansion is done. Lincoln's expanding. Tesla obviously just moved in. There's some other auto expansions going on. Residential, you've got Waterford Point, which is broken ground at 153rd and Wolf. That's going to be duplexes and single family all ranch. These price points are north of 500,000 on all those. Orland Ridge will get hopefully all the punch list items and all the landscaping, all that done. That's behind Silver Cross. So you see that we have all of these different projects kind of ongoing.
Where's Pete's going?
Pete's is at 151st and LaGrange where Art Van was. So Art Van rented from Pete's. Pete's owned it.
Okay.
So that construction is well underway. So.
Why did you take down trees on West Avenue across from the pool?
On West Avenue across from the pool.
West Avenue, right across from the pool. They're emptying out the section, all trees are coming down.
I have no idea. I'm sure there's a reason if we're doing it. I don't know what everything we're doing, but what on West Avenue, which side of the
Across from the pool.
east side? Well, that's not our those parkway trees. And the parkway trees are just other trees.
No, they're not parkway trees, right by the path. There's the path and then there's the trees that are taken out.
Well, so there's a lot of invasive trees in there. I know that, so they could be taking invasive species out.
Somebody thought they were keeping away the coyotes.
No, you're not gonna keep away the coyotes. I mean, coyotes are in the desert, so you have to keep away the trees, but there's invasive trees that go to other, that spread. And so we're probably taking out invasive species is probably what we're doing.
The trees in the bike paths are overgrown.
Yeah.
They're into the bike path.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so that's what they're doing. They're cleaning that area out, that's all. Any other questions? Well, thanks for all the questions. We took up all 2 hours and then some. So, I'm happy to answer. We do this, periodically, so I'm always happy to answer the questions and, and keep you informed about what's happening in the village. You got a question? You look like you got a question.
I do, but I was gonna ask you later.
What is it?
Thanks now.
Well, we live over, off of Marion, and we live over that way, and on one of the ponds, and this is more of a police question. Sometimes, like, there's a few people on the area that play their outside music, they have speakers outside, it's so stinking loud that we can't hear even the TV in our basement.
So you call the police on that. We actually tested that. We have noise ordinance laws, and we actually test it with a decibel meter to see if they're within the law.
Well, we did, and basically what we were told was that they had the right to do that until like 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or something.
Well, to a certain noise level, they do. And
Well,
It carries across.
yeah.
well, no, it's so stinking loud that it kind of hinges on us being able to sit in the yard in my house.
Unfortunately, we go back to First Amendment stuff, issues with that, so that's the problem. So we do have noise ordinances to the extent that we can, but if they're not above those levels, there's really not much we can do. Or outside of the times that they're allowed, there's not much we can do.
So if I put my speakers out and play Led Zeppelin really loud, to bring it over to.
Yeah, we've had some people do some of that stuff, and so, yeah.
It just doesn't seem right, I don't care what you play, everything doesn't bother me, but when I can't hear myself think in my own house, it's.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't necessarily choose our neighbors, but we can only do so much because it's still, we have to follow the Constitution. Well, again, thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. And we'll follow up with some of the stuff that I didn't know the answer to, some of the specifics, like specific roads and things like that. Either Via or Bonnie will follow up with that. I want to thank, Trustee Heatley left, but Trustee Katsinas for being here now, so they came as well. So again, I appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you the next time.
Thank you.